How have you cheated death? When I was still a fetus, my mother suffered a heavy injury to her stomach, causing the death of my twin. But I survived somehow. The doctors basically told her she must stay bedridden for the rest of the pregnancy or else she would lose me too. So my grandma got her a SNES. And she just played video games all day. I still have that SNES. I had a screening for something else and my doctor found very early stage cancer at age 34. It was removed painlessly and completely in an afternoon. It's a cancer that usually affects people over 60 and doesn't have symptoms until it's too late. If I didn't have this other screening, I likely would have died a painful death from it in 10-ish years. When the doctor first called to give me the results, he said it was divine intervention, and never gave me the results of the test I came in for. In 1977, while I was rushing to catch a bus, a man stopped me for change of $1 to use a pay phone. I gave him change, missed my bus, and minutes later it was in a horrible highway accident. Don't know if I can say I cheated death as much as had an amazing medical team that knew what they were doing. But when I was 19, I was diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma. It was on my stomach in ulcers that equaled up to 5 pounds worth of tumors. Was told on Tuesday when they were trying to figure out what specific type 1 had so they could know how to treat it, that if I didn't start a treatment plan by Friday it would be too far gone to save me. Cut to Friday morning and they basically flipped a coin and went with Burkitt's lymphoma. Luckily they were right because it has been nearly 20 years since my last round of chemo and I'm still cancer-free. Had they been wrong, I wouldn't be here typing this. Congenital heart defect. WPW. Completely unknown until 35 years old. I was playing board games with a small group, vision narrowed until I came to looking up at EMTs. They had taken turns doing CPR for 14 minutes until medical arrived and shocked me 3x to bring me back. One surgery and defib install later and everything is pretty much normal with a cheap med. Had I been driving or at home alone, that would have been it. Those 4 guys don't pay for beers ever when we go out. Edit grammar, and now spelling. My mom's cat saved my life. Was sleeping on my mom's couch after a breakup. The cat got sick and the vet determined it was carbon monoxide poisoning from the front room gas fireplace. I was in a brutal car accident. My son was 5 at the time in the back seat. Our vehicle was hit 3 times like a ping-pong ball during rush hour. Pushed over 3 lanes into oncoming traffic. When we finally stopped, we had narrowly evaded being sandwiched between 2 transport trucks. My right arm was crushed and is now all titanium. But otherwise we made it out alive. My son without a scratch thanks to a properly installed car seat. Hours later I went into another portal, hopped up on a cocktail of ketamine, morphine, etc. I am convinced I entered the edge of life-death as it was a surreal experience. I got pushed into the other side of the highway by a 18-wheeler that suddenly merged into my lane. I still have nightmares seeing the oncoming cars. Went into the hospital because my migraines developed weird symptoms. Body numbness, which caused them to do a full stroke workup. Found an aneurysm that was going to blow doing those scans. So migraines saved my life. I had a tumor removed before it progressed to colon cancer, which it likely would have done if I hadn't gone to the doctor. I was riding a motorbike at 60 miles per hour. National speed limit road. An oncoming car overtook a car on a blind bend and forced me off the road. The moment my bike hit the grass, I decided to jump off it as I was heading for a stone wall and knew that I would never be able to get control of the bike once it was off a tarmac road. The bike pummeled into the wall, and I hit the floor with force. My leathers and helmet saved me from a much worse fate, but I think if I'd have hit the oncoming car or the wall, I'd have been dead instantly. I was on my way to stay with friends and my aerosol deodorant exploded in my rucksack, and my visor completely detached from my helmet. Was supposed to be the passenger in my mom's little car when it was T-boned and that side flattened. Ran directly off a cliff in the night in a snowstorm. Flipped in the air while falling and land 25 feet below in deep soft snow. Face up. Head point down slope. Not knowing what happened, the forgotten timer set on my phone for a COVID test went off in my pocket as I was about to make a turn. The sound so startled me that I slammed on the brakes, just as a large truck ran the light and cut through my lane where it would have hit me head-on. My cousin and I were sitting on the back of a houseboat when we were little. All the adults were inside, as adults were in the 80s. After a while we stumbled inside instead of falling asleep at the back of the boat. We had carbon monoxide poisoning. Had to be rushed to the hospital. Grandpa bought a new boat motor the next day. I was hit by a drunk driver while I was riding my bike at 13. If I hadn't been wearing my helmet, I would have died. The helmet was cracked all the way through on the back. Safety equipment has never been a joke to me since. And all any of my nieces or nephews need to do is call me saying they need a new helmet and they'll have one. My bio father punched my mom in the stomach 9 weeks before I was due. A few days later she was feeling just a little off and called her doctor, who told her to go to the hospital. It turns out the placenta had ruptured and the surgeon said we both would have died that day had she just decided to sleep it off instead. One very emergency C-section later and we both made it, if not a little undercooked. Not sure if this counts, but many years ago I was riding home from our local dirt jumps on my BMX. Behind my house is a quarry which has a really rocky bridleway running down the hill. This is the route I would usually take to get home from the jumps. Anyway, I was heading home while the sun was setting and was absolutely blasting it down this rocky path. I jumped off of one of the rocks, and while I was in the air, I watched my front wheel drop out from my forks, and before I knew it, they had pummeled straight into the ground, sending me straight over the handlebars. I flew a good 2,030 feet and landed on a big rock right on my spine. I wasn't wearing a helmet at the time, but fortunately I was wearing my backpack which cushioned my landing. I walked away in shock but completely unscathed apart from a small graze on my knuckles. I have never felt so lucky to be wearing a backpack in my life. Without it I'd certainly have been paralyzed or worse. Congenital heart failure. I was a competitive swimmer growing up and misdiagnosed by many doctors. For many years, I was 2 months away from my mitral valve completely closing and suffering from complete heart failure by age 9. Luckily, a cardiologist found it after a last-ditch effort to try to figure out what was going on, and passing out in my last pool, scheduled for a rush surgery, had mitral valve replaced. I'm alive. Thankful for cardiologists. Get your heart checked. I was a C-17 loadmaster, and back in 2003 we flew a mission out of Baghdad and our plane got hit by an SA-14 at about 1,200 feet. I just happened to be sitting behind the pilot in the left ACM seat, and I got to stare at a giant blowtorch erupting out of the top of our number 2 engine and flowing over the wing, where the fuel tanks were full. I fully expected the wing to explode any second until we were on the ground and the fire trucks were spraying us down. 5 years ago I went tandem skydiving. After about 30 seconds the dude pulled the parachute, but it wasn't opening. After pulling on the ropes a bit he got his knife and cut the chute. then pulled the second one. By the time the second one was fully inflated, we were almost on the ground and landed somewhere in a field instead of the small airport we were supposed to land. They had to pick us up by car. Safe to say I'm never going skydiving again. Horrible car accident. Car flipped a ton of times. No seatbelt, flew out the window. Walked away.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.